Hi, I am Tony Fullerton. I am the grad assistant here at the Heinz Institute.
Hi, I'm Aiden Rodriguez. I'm an entrepreneurial intern here at the Heinz Institute as well.
And today we are here with Kristine Welker, seasoned strategist and as well as a seasoned exec with over 25 years of experience, as well as with a commitment to diversity and inclusion. So thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you.
Yeah, so how did you feel after that very good discussion with Rob and the entire audience?
I thought it was great. It's interesting when you're reflecting back on 25 years of experience, and I've had lots of pivots in my career.
Yeah.
And so when you try to distill that into, some semblance of order, especially when there's lots of different people at different stages of their academic career.
Yeah.
But it was really fun. It was really great. It sort of forces you to sort of reflect back on like, what are the themes? And that's always fun. And then when you can share that, I think it's exciting. And the questions were great. The one at the end.
I think you made a really good impact. I think what you said really stuck with them. That's why they had so many questions.
Oh yeah, well that one question, like what was the low point in your career? I didn't see that one coming, but it's a great question. It's a great question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you had a lot of good takeaways, especially about building your personal narrative, and that as well as when you're changing careers, you want to say like, what do you want to say to employers and things like that. So I think you have a lot of good insights into the workforce.
Yeah, your career narrative is so important, whether you're sort of reflecting back on it or you're shaping it now. Everything is really important. And it starts with really just thinking about, that's why I always love when people say it's not about sort of a linear path. Just think about what it is that's going to drive you and really understand, what your own personal brand looks like, what your own, profile is, what excites you, what drives you. And then as you pointed out too, whether it's in the classroom or in a corporate office or deciding if you want to be, a startup or in a big organization, that fit really matters because that's going to, you want to make sure that you're aligned, culturally, but yeah, I think that's very important, that narrative, thinking about it. What do you want it to say about you? Because sometimes it makes it a little easier to make decisions. It's not like, it's about that next step up in the organization. I mean, maybe for some people it is a startup.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's maybe a move over because you want to learn something new, but it is going back to, what that narrative is.
And continuously keeping your like passion and like that drive that you mentioned, like what drives you.
Yeah, you have to find that. Like I said, I just had this, what I was referred to in the end at Hearst as sort of the startup kid. I didn't know that originally. I launched Cosmo Girl. I just, was excited about, taking on a launch, and then you realize you like to build things, you like a white space, but, not everybody loves that. Not everybody wants to look at a white space. Some people think that's exciting and other people think that's overwhelming, and that's okay. You just need to know, like you said, what's going to really drive you, and not be afraid when you want to make a change. That's the other thing. I mean, I remember thinking when my boss said, that is career suicide. And I remember having to have the courage to say, I feel like, this is the right opportunity at the right time. And it's something that's going to really excite me. It may not make sense to you. It may not make sense on paper, but it's something that I'm really excited about. And that was when I moved from the magazine of Cosmo Girl over into digital. But sometimes you have to challenge conventional wisdom, whether it's your boss, your mentor, or just making a decision to just do something different.
Yeah.
So how did you find that drive and continuously apply it to all of your different career paths?
Well, I think it's interesting. It's a great question. I think what I realized at Cosmo Girl is that the most important thing is, once you've created something that you're really proud of, knowing that it's time to move on. And so at Cosmo Girl, as I mentioned, it was the number one selling, teen magazine brand at the time. And that was when I decided it was time for me to move on. And it goes back to understanding what really drives you, but also looking at the marketplace. You want to take calculated risks with your business, your brand, your career. But, being in the teen space for so long, the world was becoming so digital and people were digitally connected. And I just thought that was something I needed to be a part of from a career decision, but also personally. I thought, being the consummate learner, always being curious. That's a lot of what, people in the startup world, they're very curious. They love to innovate, they love a white space, but regardless, people should just be curious in life and be curious about what's next. Be curious about what's that next thing. Yeah. So I think that would be the theme. That curiosity, led me to digital, and then decided to go over to launch Dr. Oz because it was just time. And then ultimately going from for-profit into nonprofit, which was another big change. Yeah.
So you emphasize the ability to be able to say no to people and keep going with your ideas no matter how crazy they think that your ideas are. So how were you able to find that confidence to keep going after many advisors have advised you not to keep going, and as you may have called it, career suicide? Yeah. How did you pursue through that?
Well, one, you do want to trust your instincts and just really have faith in your ability to overcome challenges and adversity. And, even when people that you respect, your mentors, when they think that, again, the word career suicide was truly the word that was used. And I just had this real sense that it was the right time and the right thing for me. Yeah. And my dad always referred to it as blind ambition. But, I really think it's just understanding, it goes back to, just looking at your narrative, your career journey as what do you want it to say about you? Make it interesting, make it exciting, and I also, people say that they're fearless. I wouldn't say I was fearless. I think I was more, fearful that I didn't want to look back with regret. I didn't want to look back and regret that, I didn't, decide to, challenge conventional wisdom and say, yes, I want to leave the #1 selling magazine to go over to digital. I think that's very important, is that sort of aspect.
Wow, that's really interesting. So,
and it's when you're talking about, speaking of challenges, one thing is that when you were in the group, one thing you said is that your superpower as an entrepreneur is your acceptance of collaboration and how you value that and think it's one of the important things as an entrepreneur. But how did you deal with challenges? Because not everyone's a team player, as they would say. So how did you overcome those challenges, forming teams to expand your career, as well as how do you find the right people to collaborate with?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is when you walk in, and regardless whether I was stepping into MDA, which was an 800-person organization, or stepping into Cosmo Girl, where literally there were 2 of us building from scratch, or somewhere in between, which was, say, Hearst Digital, for example, where it was across 26 brands. There's a lot of complexity and lots of layers of complexity, whether it's complexity in building a team, organizational complexities, because it's you have to sort of have an organizational shift in the mindset, or if it's the, just the basic complexities of, running a business. But what I think is really important is when you start with, and I think I mentioned this, strategy, and the structure follows. There are some organizing principles that I think we should all learn, and that bode well for us in the end. So developing the strategy and then creating a structure that can execute against that strategy. Yeah. So that's part one. But then you have to build a team or convince people in the organization to buy into that strategy. Yeah. And want to participate in that structure and help drive those shared outcomes. And that goes back to your point. That's not always easy. So what I have found success in is just a collaboration, a partnership model. Yeah. You're going in and collaborating, because if people share in the building of the plan, then they will participate and feel some sense of ownership to execute against the plan. And that's where I go back to, I love that term, focus, accountability, simplicity, and trust, because often you have to move really fast to either convince somebody or to achieve profitability, whatever it is, you're going to be against a deadline. Yeah. And so the idea of having that focus, making sure that everybody's focused and moving in the same direction, the accountability, and then just simplify it. Make it easy for people to succeed. Make it easy for people to drive those outcomes. And then sometimes the hardest part is that you have to just trust in your structures, trust in your strategy, and trust in your people. And that everybody's going to do and play, do their part. And trust, I think, is one of the most important things.
Yeah. So with that, a lot of what you've done in terms of building those collaborations and your strategy that's led up to the success of all your business ventures, it was done by motivation. So how did you find that motivation to continue doing everything that you've been doing?
That is a really good question. Well, one, I don't know, for me, it probably goes back to, work ethic and, sort of, I hate to say it, your upbringing. I mean, I was the first kid to go to college in my family, which I know sounds so like, old school. Thankfully, that's not even a data point anymore. But I was the first kid to go to school. I had 48 cousins, grew up in a very, blue collar town.
Big family.
Big family. And I just had this sort of, internal drive that I just wanted to succeed. And success wasn't always about making a lot of money. I really just wanted to succeed. I wanted to do something significant. That's actually a quote I remember hearing from Oprah Winfrey that I always loved. She's like, do you want to be significant or do you want to be successful? Because she said, if you find significance in your life, success will follow.
Okay.
And I just think that, so much of it was, just wanting to, be a part of, the workforce. But I think that it's the work ethic that I had that was my driving motivator, because, nobody steps in and says that they want to just start up businesses.
Yeah.
That's not for the faint of heart. Nobody's just going to decide to leave their job when you just hit like the number one mark. That's not for the faint of heart. So I think that goes back to also knowing what your motivators are. And I know we talked a lot about this. I was just motivated by, being with innovative thinkers, thought leaders, people that wanted to make change happen, willing to break down barriers. And, once you figure out what your like superpower is, what drives your sort of mojo, then I think sometimes the decisions are easier in the end, to know, okay, it's time for me to move on. What's that motivating factor?
Yeah. With that, when did you find that you wanted to be significant in the specific way that you've been significant? If that makes sense. Like, when did it click that you wanted to be significant to make Cosmo grow?
It's interesting. I'm not sure it did click. I think that was sort of an undercurrent that was always there. What I've realized in hindsight is that everywhere I worked, even, I was always in a mission-oriented brand environment. So my first job coming out of college was Ladies Home Journal. Okay. And that mantra was never underestimate the power of a woman. Then I go over to Cosmo Girl, Born to Lead. And then, just the idea of, leveraging everything I did in media to be meaningful and make change happen between the for-profit world and the nonprofit world, which then led to driving disability inclusion, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think all of this, it's interesting, has sort of been this underlying desire to be significant in what I was doing every day, to make sure that I connected with whatever brand or whatever organization that I was throwing myself into, 24/7. And I realized that organizational values, is there, does this company share the values I have? And does this brand have purpose? And not just purpose to like sell product, but is there another purpose where it's adding value? I mean, even when you think about Dr. Oz, we came up with the brand name for Dr. Oz, the magazine, The Good Life, because people would just come up and be like, I just want to live a good life. I just want to be happy and healthy. And so we just lean into that and made the purpose of that brand about helping people achieve their best life. The good life. So I think when you look back on all of that, it's interesting. You just want to make sure that you find that cultural fit, that there's the organizational fit, and that, your values are aligned. your personal values, and your organizational values.
That's very insightful. And last question. Failure is something that has to happen in every success, right? So with that, you made it a point in the discussion with Rob that it was important to fail forward, but also you indicated that after you need to fail fast, and after you fail fast, you need to fail forward. So why don't you talk us through what that means a little bit and how students can implement that with their college careers?
A lot of people would talk about, failing fast. You want to fail quickly. Well, sometimes that's not a reality. Sometimes, it takes a little bit longer. So take the timeline out. Failing and failure is inevitable. Like you said, it's going to happen to you personally. It's going to happen to you professionally. It could happen in your product that you're launching. It is inevitable. So the whole idea is to really sort of fail forward. And I don't know, I just remember thinking it that day when they were talking about failure and fail fast. And I thought, I just want to fail forward.
Yeah.
It may be a misstep, but at least it's a step that's going to take you in the right direction. And so not looking at it as failure. And, one good example I will tell you is that when at Hearst, they were launching their digital properties. They had a big launch. And this is when magazines didn't have websites. And now, everybody has a website. But at that time, the first pass at that was what we would call a digital failure. So it was really more just looking at what didn't work and then using that to inform your strategies and what you can do differently.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on here. That was amazing.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
That's
for being
great.
with us.
Thank you. And am I the last of the series of speakers?
Oh no, you're the first one of the day.
Oh,
You had to start off strong.
Yeah.
well, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.